me, pick me. Hello everyone, I'm Sarah from Everyday Starlet. Welcome to my channel. I make videos to inspire you to be the star of your own life. Today I want to talk to you about pick me energy versus decentering men. These are really big terms that I'm seeing come up on social media a lot, and I really wanted to kind of break down the idea of the pick me girl and of decentering men, really explore it and see how it fits in with feminine energy. Now, if you're new to my content, I don't approach feminine energy the way a lot of femininity coaches approach feminine energy, where I tell you that you have to be, you know, a trad wife, or you have to fit into a certain specific box, or you have to look and dress and act a certain way, you have to be super girly or anything. Those things are all great. If you want to embrace those things, more power to you. But I don't believe that that actually defines your feminine energy. And the basis for a lot of pick me behavior actually comes from a lot of wounding and is not really healthy feminine energy. Unfortunately, it often gets presented as healthy feminine energy when in fact in most cases it is not. So when I first started hearing the term pick me or pick me girl, or talking about pick me energy, or some people call it a pick misha or things like that, and I started really learning more about what it was, I was like, oh wow. I've been a pick-me girl in the past, and so I consider myself now a recovering pick-me. Now, before everybody attacks me and starts thinking I'm a horrible person if you hate pick-me girls, let me explain. A pick-me girl, by definition, in our current society now, tends to fit into a certain box or a certain stereotype, but in reality, pick-me energy can look a lot of different ways, and it can present itself differently depending on the woman, because we're all different, and also depending on the type of men that these women are looking to get picked by. Because in some cases you have a woman who just wants to be picked by any man anytime, but there are also women who want to be picked by a certain type of man and want a certain type of attention, so their pick me energy is going to look different. What a pick me looked like back in my youth, in my younger years, like in my teens and 20s, was different than what the girls are kind of doing now, because it was just a different world back then. When I see a lot of girls that really give off what we consider now to be very pick me energy, I'm like, ooh, I see a lot of my old self in that. I see a lot of my younger self in that. Not everything, but a lot of things. So let's start off by talking about what a pick me actually is. Basically, a pick me girl is a woman who is desperate for male attention and male validation and wants to be chosen by a man or men in general, and will do anything to get that. Now, I've had some criticism when I've mentioned pick me energy before, so I want to make it clear that if you are a feminine being, and most women are feminine at their core, we have access to our masculine energy, we have access to our feminine energy, but for most women, our best selves are going to be found in our feminine energy. That's our birthright. As women, our feminine energy is our birthright. It's who we are. And for most of us that are living in a very masculine world, our masculine energy, well, good to have in today's world, because you really need masculine energy in today's world in order to survive, because we've created our world that way. But most women are not going to be their best selves if they live their whole lives in masculine energy. We're going to want to return home. Many women are conditioned today to not live in their feminine energy. We're trained to have to be in our masculine energy all the time in order to survive. But the reality is, most women are going to be our best selves when we return home to our feminine energy. It's not weak, it's not desperate, it's not meant to be, you know, catering to men. That's not what our feminine energy is at all. And I think that that gets very much misrepresented in, you know, the red pill space, the manosphere, but also in a lot of the trad wife content and things like that. Feminine energy gets very misrepresented as a lot of these cultural stereotypes. That's not the feminine energy I'm talking about. I'm talking about our feminine energy, which is connected to nature, cycling with the seasons, cycling with the moon, actually connecting to our true feminine selves. And it is perfectly normal for a woman who is connected to her feminine energy to desire to be seen by the masculine, to desire to be seen by a masculine partner. The feminine is witnessed. The masculine is the one who witnesses. The feminine is the one who's witnessed. It's also very normal because the feminine tends to prioritize community and connection, relationships, love, things like that. So it is perfectly normal, if you are a feminine core being, to desire to be in relationship, to desire to be in connection, to desire a masculine partner. That is totally normal. And this video is not meant to shame or judge you for wanting to be in a relationship with a masculine partner, for wanting love, for wanting connection, for wanting to be seen, and for wanting to be witnessed. Those things are all totally normal, and we should really embrace and accept those things. We shouldn't be shamed for desiring them. However, when we start getting into the pick-me energy, that desire tends to be replaced by a need. And I've talked about this in other videos, but I want to mention this again. Think about neediness. Think about need. Need has a very contracted feel to it. When you need something, it's like you tend to smother it. You tend to latch onto it. It's a neediness. It's very contractive. The word need kind of almost, I think of it as like feeling like it shuts you down, like you're actually like closed off, like you need something, right? There's like an attachment to it. Whereas desire feels very open, right? You desire something, like you want something, you crave something. And the reality is, as much as there is a message out there of like men need to be needed, that's not actually what that means. Nobody wants to be needed. People want to be desired. And that's not just a man or woman thing, that's a human thing. We all want to be desired by our partner. Neediness is usually going to feel smothering and contracted. Now, when people say men need to be needed, there's some truth to that, but the wording is a little off, right? Men want to know that they have a place in your life, and they want to know that they have a purpose for being in your life. So if you're a woman who's like, I can do everything myself, I don't need anyone around me, that tends to be a wall up. Men don't necessarily want you to need them in the sense, I mean, unless they are manipulative, unless they are very insecure men and very manipulative men, they don't really want you to need them. They want you to desire them, and they want to feel like they have a purpose and a place in your life, which is a different thing than you being solely dependent on them. Because let's face it, in reality, take a masculine man. A masculine man is going to be very focused on purpose. He's going to want to have a relationship with a woman who is in support of his highest purpose. But if he is focused on a purpose, like he has a goal in life, he has a purpose that is greater than himself, something that he is here, and he's found his reason for being here and to serve a higher good. He can't have a woman that is constantly like, I need you to do this, I need you to do that, I need you here, I need your attention, I need that, right? That's not to say that a man should be neglecting you, but a masculine man who has a greater purpose is not going to want to be with a woman that like cannot survive a day or an hour or something without him there. He can't be dropping everything and, you know, leaving, you know, an important meeting or leaving something that he is doing that is his greater purpose because you can't open a pickle jar or something, you know what I mean? That doesn't mean that like if he's there, it isn't nice to be like, hey, could you help me with this, right? But if a woman is not capable of surviving without her man right there, that is going to be very smothering to someone. And women are the same way. I think most women have known what it's like to experience a man who's very needy, and it can feel very smothering. As women, we want to be desired. We want to have someone who desires us. We don't necessarily want someone who needs us, because that's gonna feel very smothering to us. And the same thing with men. Desire is great, and men in particular are gonna need to know that they have some kind of a place in your life, that they have a purpose for being there, that you're not just like, oh, I can do everything myself, I can do everything myself. Like masculine men are going to want to know that they have a reason for being in your life, that they're there and they serve a purpose. If it becomes needy in the sense that you can't function on your own, I mean, and I'm not talking about, you know, not being there for somebody when they're vulnerable or anything like that. Like, obviously we all want a partner that would drop everything if we absolutely needed them. A constant neediness is going to feel smothering to anybody as humans. That's part of the problem with the pick-me energy, because while it is completely normal and attractive to desire a partner, to desire partnership, to even desire attention, neediness and being attached to that desperate need for something is going to be very off-putting. There may be men, typically men who are either very insecure or men who are very manipulative or abusive, may find somebody who is that needy to be appealing because, you know, they can either use them or they, you know, may think that they can manipulate them or something like that. But I'm guessing if you're watching this video as a woman, you probably don't want a man like that in your life, right? It's really important as women, I'm speaking to women, but it's actually important for everyone to not get so hung up on the neediness and that like contractive needing to latch on. Like they always say, like, you know, if you have a bird and you hang on to it and you smother it, it might die, or it's gonna try to get away. Whereas like if you let a bird go but it actually comes back to you, then you know it's yours, that kind of thing. Like I just think I just butchered that metaphor, but it's that kind of thing, right? Like the desire for, you know, partnership, connection, attention even, that's all great. It's the neediness that's the problem. And pick-me energy very often is attached to neediness. Another layer of pick-me energy is that very often when women exhibit pick-me energy, they tend to do things that are outside of their character, outside of their morality, and they can often do things that are harmful. So I think that the stereotypical idea of pick-me energy is, a lot of people kind of throw out just pearly things. For any of you that aren't familiar, she tends to be somebody who creates all of her content essentially to cater to men, in a sense of villainizing women and making men seem like they are the victims. And I'm actually going to get into that whole mentality a little bit later. But she's not the only person, but I think she's probably the most popular one. There are a lot of women out there who go online and create these whole personas that are very much like catering to men's beliefs about women being the bad guys and trying to make men seem like they're the victims, things like that. I'll dive into that in a minute. But that's only one type of pick-me energy. There are also women who try to play the cool girl. That was kind of more the category I fell into, of women who act like so low maintenance and like are just willing to go along with anything and, you know, up for anything and just, you know, anything that the guy wants, or just sort of willing to put themselves up on a shelf and just be whatever it is that a guy wants, or make themselves into a man's fantasy or something like that. I also see, I gotta be honest, and this might be controversial, I see women who are completely reconstructing themselves in plastic surgery. Like so many women today are actually like making themselves into human blow-up dolls. The fake everything, like literally fake from head to toe. I know that that's kind of viewed today in our society as women's liberation, over-sexualizing ourselves, and I'm all for it. I have a video talking about sacred sexuality and female sexuality and things like that. I'm all for women embracing their sexuality. However, if you're embracing your sexuality in a way that is catering to male validation or a male fantasy that is actually created by porn culture, which I'm gonna do a video talking about the dangers of porn culture. But if you as a woman are catering to that when it comes to men, and I know there's a lot of women who are like, oh, we don't do this stuff for men. And I don't think that every woman has plastic surgery solely to appease a man. I'm not saying that. But let's be real. If you as a woman are having surgeries to turn yourself into sort of this almost like animated plastic male fantasy, or trying to look like a porn star, why else would you be doing it? Right? You know what I mean? Like, why else would you be doing that if not to cater to male attention? And I realize that there are a lot of women who are like, well, I'm doing it for OnlyFans so that I can, you know, make money, but you're still catering to that male attention. You may not necessarily be doing it for a specific relationship, but you still are doing this to make yourself into something that is solely exists for male attention, even if it is just to get money from them or something like that, right? The minute that you start going under the knife and stuff to do something to make yourself into something for men or for male validation or just for the male gaze or something, you're putting your life and your health at risk solely to get male attention, whether it is to be in a relationship or whether it's not. Like, that's not real sexuality. Like, that's not a woman actually connecting with her sexuality. Let's be honest, okay? I absolutely support women being able to connect to their sexuality. However, the women today that are doing it from a sense of the male gaze and male validation are not doing it as women's liberation. They're doing it to cater to a male fantasy, to gain attention, maybe even to gain money or something, but they're doing it for men. For the male gaze, for male attention. And there's probably other ways too, but those are some of the ways that women exhibit this sort of like neediness for either a man picking her in relationship, or maybe a man just picking her for a night, or a man picking her just to pay attention to her on social media, or pay money to see her do stuff on social media or something. Like, there's various reasons why a woman would want to be picked and what that being picked will look like. But really what it is it's a culture of women, and honestly, for most of us women, we have been raised to believe that a man's approval is the ultimate. many of us women grew up desperately trying to get our father's approval in various ways. So there's different ways that this sort of pick-me energy can show up. And I'm not making this video to shame people because, again, there's a lot of ways that I've identified with, you know, being a pick-me girl over the years. And I'm not necessarily proud of it, but I also know that there were things that I had to go through in order to get me where I am today. My own personal story was a little bit more trying to be the cool girl. Like, I can be the cool low maintenance girl, which I'm not low maintenance. I have to accept that about myself. But I always tried to come across that way, to be the cool girl, the low maintenance girl. I spent so much of my younger years desperately trying to figure out like what men wanted, you know. And it's interesting because I actually watched a documentary about Just Pearly Things, and I don't want to talk about her too much and make this video all about her, but people have talked about her and her past, and some of her friends have talked about how she just used to like stay up all night and try to figure out what men wanted and trying to become what men wanted. And I gotta be honest, I saw a lot of myself in that. I used to obsess over that stuff, trying to figure out what men wanted so I could make myself into that thing that men wanted. I pictured turning myself into a, you know, I mean, the trad wife trend, to be honest with you. Like, I'm gonna be the perfect cook, and I'm gonna be the perfect everything, and I'm gonna be, you know, I'm gonna try to be perfect and be this like perfect kind of like 1950s housewife, and that's what I wanted to be. And some of those things are absolutely a part of who I am, and I'm not necessarily ashamed of any of those things. I went blonde probably initially to get male attention. I like my hair blonde now. I keep doing it because honestly I like the way it looks. It feels very much like me. I love cooking. I really do. Did I initially try to get into it because I thought it would be more likely to get me a man? Yeah. But I actually enjoy it. So I don't necessarily regret the journey. And, you know, if you are looking back on your life and thinking like, oh, I'm embarrassed because I used to act like this, or I used to do this, or you know, and this could not necessarily just be pick-me energy, but with anything. If you're looking back on your life and thinking you regret some of the choices that you made, they're learning experiences. They are. Some of us have to learn things the hard way. Some of us have to learn different lessons in life. I just think it's all part of a greater plan. I also was someone who, I had this real pattern, and I didn't even realize it until actually relatively recently in my life, within the past few years, that I was so caught up in feeling like I had to achieve something, or I had to kind of like immerse myself fully into a man's world and be kind of like a star in a man's world in order to get his approval. And then I figured then I would win him over. And in most cases, not because I was trying to necessarily, but I would become like better at whatever that was than him. And he would end up then not liking me because I kind of outshined him. I wasn't doing that intentionally. It was just like, oh my God, if I can just like achieve this or get to this level of something, then this man will choose me. And so I immersed myself into worlds, you know, and I'm not ashamed of doing that, but I look at some of the things that I've done in my past that I'm like, oh, I was totally doing that because I was trying to win approval from a man, or I was totally doing that because I thought that would get me a man. I don't necessarily regret a lot of those paths because, you know, they were great experiences for me, but they never got me the man. And that's the thing that nobody wants to tell you. I listen to, unfortunately, because they come up in my feed and because of the kind of topics I discuss, I hear some of the guys with the podcast bros, the manosphere, the red pill, and they talk about what men want in a woman. It's like fit, feminine, submissive. Well, first of all those things don't actually exist all in the same person. A lot of them are contradictory. But if we're talking about a woman being fit, a woman being, you want to call it feminine, let's talk about like, we'll call that sort of the stereotypical trad wife thing. I don't believe that's actually feminine, but like call that the typical trad wife thing. And submissive, basically, you know, willing to just follow his lead blindly, right? And of course the woman has to be young. She has to be a certain age. Well, when I was young, I was all of those things. I made myself into all of those things. Every time a guy would say, as men, we want this, I tried to make myself into that person. And it never got me a good guy. I mean, it got me a few dates. I even got married at one point, but it never got me a quality man, like ever. So when I hear guys say these things and they're like, we want a woman at this, we want a woman at that, I'm like, no, you don't. You absolutely don't. And of course I will get guys that will flip around and be like, we want it to be genuine. We don't want you to pretend to be this thing. It's like, okay, but these things that you're asking women to be are not actually things that most women are at their core. I've talked about this in other videos, but like, I'm not at all discouraging a healthy lifestyle, but fitness, being very disciplined with food, being disciplined in the gym, it's a masculine mindset. It is. I mean, and I'm not saying that women shouldn't work out or shouldn't be healthy or anything like that, but like having that structured discipline around fitness is a masculine mindset. When men say feminine in that sense, when they say feminine in those terms of the fit, feminine, submissive, they're talking about a woman who's basically gonna mother them, which isn't really feminine energy. And then of course the submissive is what they're looking for, is blind submission, because the reality is no man that has created a safe environment and is a true healthy masculine leader has to tell a woman to be submissive. Women will naturally, I don't like the term submissive, but it will naturally relax and trust in his leadership because he has shown up in a way that is trustworthy. So if a man has to ask or demand a woman's submission, so to speak, he probably hasn't earned it. But I look back at all those things that I tried to make myself into, and I realize that I'm not in the age range that these guys are looking for a woman in, because according to them, a woman hits a wall at 25, and that was a long time ago for me. But like when I was young, I was those things. I was a model. I was in a beauty pageant, for God's sakes, in those years. I loved to cook. I wanted to keep a home. I wanted to have a family. I tried to make myself into that person. I mean, I would get attention from men, but I certainly never got dates with quality men. And I know there are gonna be guys that are gonna be like, well, look at you now. Well, you didn't know me when I was, you know, like 22 or anything. So the gist of what I'm saying is, pick-me's don't usually get picked. And if they do get picked, they don't usually get picked by quality men. They usually get picked by guys who are either really insecure, so they need a woman who needs them, who's gonna become dependent on them, or they tend to get picked by men who are very manipulative. They don't get picked by quality men. That's the hypocrisy of the whole argument. Men will tell you this is what we want, but they don't pick that girl. That's why the irony kills me of guys that will come on like my social media, and when I'm giving women advice, they'll be like, oh, see, that's the reason why you're single. That's the reason why you don't have a man. That's the reason why you don't have a ring on your finger, all these things. And I'm like, really, sir? Because listening to men and listening to men say what they wanted and trying to be the perfect woman, trying to be that woman that men said that they wanted, and doing the opposite of everything that I'm telling women now to do, is actually what got me single. Is actually the reason why I'm not in a relationship right now, because I dedicated too much of my life to trying to cater to men and trying to be what men wanted and trying to make myself into everything that guys are telling women that they should be now in their younger years. When I was younger, when I was in that like 18 to 22 year old range that men always claim is the only acceptable range for a woman to be in, I was desperately trying to be that woman, and it didn't get me a man, or it didn't get me a quality man. So that's why when I tell women now the lessons that I've learned, and people are like, that's why you're still single, it's like, no, sir. That's not why I'm still single. I'm single because I spent so much time listening to loudmouth men that didn't know what they were talking about. It's interesting too, because I think oftentimes guys think that wifing a woman up or marrying a woman that is, you know, the good girl that they pretend that they want or say that they want, you know, the low body count, traditional values, wanting to be a stay-at-home wife and mother, which none of these things are wrong, by the way. A woman who is catering to that, it's like, well, those are the women that will marry, as if for most men marrying them is a reward, when in reality most men can't even afford to have a wife anyway. I'm going off on a tangent here, but the gist that I'm getting at is I spent too much of my life as a pick-me, desperately trying to get male approval, and I'm single, I'm divorced. It didn't get me a good relationship. And I also now, in my 40s, am trying to figure out myself, because I spent so much time trying to fit myself into a box that I was told that I should be, or was the box that I was told would be the path that would get me to a man, or a good man, and it didn't work. So that's why I make this content and I share with you, because I don't want younger women to make the same mistake. Are all younger women gonna listen to me? Probably not. I wouldn't have listened to me when I was younger, so I get it. But, you know, if I can encourage younger women to not attach to this neediness of needing male attention, male validation, needing to be chosen by a man, needing to be picked, and just get to know themselves. Because the reality is as a woman, if you spend your time trying to become what men say they want. And you do find someone, you might even find a man of some substance or high value man or something like that, but you're not gonna know who you are. And you're probably gonna end up resenting that man because you're gonna feel lost in your relationship, or you're not gonna feel like, you may even feel like he's not a good match for you because you don't really know yourself and things are gonna be off. It's like a recipe for disaster in reality because resentment will destroy a relationship. I just think it's so important for women to really get to know themselves. It's funny how when I talk about this stuff, I'll get guys like, oh, so you're telling women they need to be sleeping around with a bunch of people. No, I don't advocate promiscuity. I don't advocate any kind of like unhealthy behavior. But I do think it's important for women to spend some time getting to know yourself. You know, spend some time getting to know who you are, what you want. Not focus so much on trying to be whatever you think that a man might want from you. So if you do find yourself falling into this sort of pick-me pattern, and again, it can look different ways, but if you really are attached to that need for male validation or a need to be picked by a man, I would just encourage you to work on that. That's probably, you know, something from childhood or trauma or something, and just work on that within yourself. It's worth it. I guarantee you it's worth it. Doing that did not get me a man. I realize people are like, where's your ring? I don't have one, but you know, it's my choice that I don't have my ring anymore. But it is so much better. It is so much better. I can tell you as somebody who's been married and been divorced, it is so much better to be single than to be in a relationship that is not right for you. It is so much better. And I don't want women to fear, you know, ending up single or, you know, ending up childless. It was a big fear of mine. It was something that terrified me. And now that I'm faced with the possibility, I don't know if I'm gonna have kids or not. You know, obviously my window is closing. It's not completely closed, but it's closing. It's something I've had to come to terms with. And I have a video talking about being child-free by choice and stuff if you want to check that out. But instead of hanging on to this desperation of marriage is a milestone, having a baby is a milestone, and being really attached to like the timeline of your life, getting to know yourself, getting to know the kind of person that fits in your life that you would be a good match for and that would be a good match for you is so much better. And then you find that person and then you decide, okay, is marriage with this person, is this something that aligns in our life? Is having a baby together something that aligns for us? And actually prioritizing finding yourself and finding a good relationship to be in partnership with, and then deciding when those milestones are going to happen is just such a better way to live. It's a healthier way to live for your mental health and for everything, instead of being like, okay, I have to get married by this time and I have to have a baby by this time, and just looking at like, okay, you know what? I'm going to connect with myself, what I want, what my desires are, the kind of lifestyle I want, and then finding somebody who's a good match for that. I will say the pick-me energy of the social media influencers, it's dangerous. I mean, obviously, you know, I mentioned the concept of plastic surgery and things like that, which is, I believe, is one type of pick-me energy, and I know there's a lot of people that are like, that's not for men. Some of it is, for sure. Some of it definitely is. It's interesting because, like, as I mentioned, just Pearly Things, which I'm not going to dive into her too much, but the thing that really concerns me about content like that, and these women who kind of like pose as these like sort of like men's rights advocates or men's health advocates or something like that, what they're actually doing is not really helping men's health. Like, I'm all for supporting men's health. Men do need more mental health help and assistance, and men do need to do more therapy, inner work, absolutely. I'm a big advocate of men getting the help, support, and guidance that they need. However, on no planet is actually catering to men's victimhood a part of being a men's health advocate. And unfortunately, that's what a lot of these influencers end up doing, is they end up catering to men's victimhood. And the problem with catering to men's victimhood is it actually perpetuates this idea in men's minds that they're being victimized by women, which in reality, if you actually look at the statistics, is not true. But when men are victimized by something in society, more often than not, they're being victimized by other men. But the problem with some of these pick-me influencers that are, you know, men's health advocates or whatever it is they want to call themselves, is they convince men and they perpetuate this idea in men's minds that men are the victims. They're also being victimized by women. So now men see women as the enemy, and it actually encourages more men's violence against women, because it convinces men. If men think that women are the villains and that men are being victimized by women, it's much easier for them to justify violence and abuse against women, because they see women as being the villains that are oppressing them, when in reality, historically, that's really never been the case, right? Have men been oppressed in society? Have certain groups of men been oppressed in society? Absolutely, but not by women. They've been oppressed by other men. The thing that really angers me about some of these, like the extreme pick-me influencers who are catering to men's victimhood mentality, is they're actually encouraging violence against women. And when they are women who are perpetuating this mentality, that really gets under my skin, because I'm like, wait a second, as a woman, you should understand how dangerous that is and how bad it is that you're perpetuating a society that makes things more violent and dangerous for women and children. I could go off on a whole tangent about that. I'm not saying that Pearl is the only one who does this. There are other influencers that do this too. She's probably the most popular. And I think in her case, there's a lot of like self-hatred, hatred of herself, hatred of other women that she's taking out. I could dive into my thoughts on her, and I'm not gonna make this whole video about that. But when it comes to influencers, I had this kind of interesting experience. It was kind of a lesson for me. There's another female influencer, I'm not gonna mention her name because I don't want to give her any more attention, but I checked her out initially because somebody told me about her, and I went to her content. I was like, it was feeling off to me. I couldn't really figure out specifically what was off, but it was feeling off. And I scanned her comment section, and oh my God, her comment section was overrun by these men in victimhood. They're the guys who are nice guys, the guys who say they're nice guys but are actually jerks. And then they're like, I don't get it, I'm such a nice guy, but you're like, okay, I can tell you're a sleazeball. That's why you have to, because nice guys don't have to announce that they're nice guys, they just are. We all accept that they're good people. And I stand by I've heard this quote a few different times in a few different ways, but like, there's a difference between being a nice guy and a good man. Like, you want a good man, you don't want a nice guy. Nice guys are usually dangerous. When a guy says I'm a nice guy, usually there's a victimhood mentality behind that. Because when a guy's like, I'm a nice guy, what he's actually saying is, I've let myself be a doormat and let people walk all over me, and now I want to get even with people because I'm bitter that I've let people walk all over me. When it's like, okay, that's not a good man. Victimhood mentality in men, incredibly dangerous. I'm not saying that men can't be victims of things, they absolutely can be, but a guy in a victimhood mentality is a dangerous man. It's not good for a woman to be in victimhood mentality. However, it's less dangerous for a woman to be in victimhood mentality. Men in victimhood mentality tend to end up doing really dangerous things. So I'm looking at the social media influencer stuff. She was so catering to men, and she was vilifying women, and like, it was more subtle than somebody like, say, like a Just Pearly Things or something. That's actually something I will say, as an influencer and as someone who's been on social media for a while, I've realized that sometimes the algorithms on social media just don't get you to the audience that you want to see. It's frustrating. But if you're following someone on social media and their entire comment section is like men in victimhood mode, or men who are like, oh, woe is me, or whoa, oh, life has been so tough, like, or just like whiny, victimized men, you're probably dealing with a woman who's a pick-me, who's catering to that mentality. Now, before anyone comes to me and says, oh, don't you care about men's mental health? Look, I used to work with mostly men. It's how I got into the whole, like, trying to be a cool girl, kind of trying to be one of the guys, trying to be, like, chummy with everybody, ignore misogynistic comments and blah, blah, blah. Like, that's how I got into that, was working with mostly men. I was in stand-up comedy for years, and I gotta be honest with you, stand-up comedy, I know that's really big in the media now with everything, with the Cat Williams interview and everyone talking about stand-up comics, Matt Rife and all the drama around that and stuff like that. I've been around stand-up comics most of my adult life. Most stand-up comics are severely mentally ill. Most of them are men, and most of them are severely mentally ill. I cannot tell you how many times I have stayed after comedy shows and sat and talked to a guy and let him vent because I was afraid that he wasn't stable enough to just go home himself and be alone, and that he might hurt himself. I've sat there, I've listened to guys vent, I've listened to them talk, I've been a shoulder for them to cry on, I've been an ear to listen. I am not someone who is like, oh, screw men, screw men's mental health. I've been the supportive friend in plenty of situations. I have a ton of empathy for people. That said, catering to a man's victimhood is not men's mental health. Telling men that they are victims of women or they're victims of how women treat them, getting them in a victimhood mentality, does not support men's mental health. I'm not telling women to not let a man cry. I have a whole video talking about men crying in relationships and things like that. I'm not someone who tells men to keep their feelings bottled up and tells men like screw your mental health or anything like that. I would never say that. I'm a huge advocate of caring for anybody's mental health, especially men, because I don't think that men are as likely to go seeking it. However, unfortunately, and I have a video talking about this too, but unfortunately, because there is such a lack of healthy masculine leadership in our society, it opens up a space for really terrible male leadership, which is kind of the place we're in now. And it does also open up a place for women to step in, and a lot of them are making good money off of this too, and actually catering to men's victimhood and trying to become a woman that men are gonna be like, oh, she understands me, she gets me. When in reality, these women are probably just manipulating these guys for money and telling these men what they wanna hear. And I just find it funny because I've had so many conversations with like, you know, guy friends I've worked with over the years when I would like vent to them about a relationship I was in. And I would have guys that would say to me like, you know, that guy just told you what you wanted to hear. And I'd be like, well, yeah, but I wanted to hear it. So obviously I fell for it. And it's like, I just want to say to some of these guys, like, guys, these women are just telling you what you want to hear. Like, and you're falling for it. I know I went off on a tangent here, but pick me energy is damaging to you as a person because you will often do things that are not safe, healthy, or within your character or your morality. It will have you dating men that you probably shouldn't be dating because, you know, oh, I don't want to seem like I'm a gold digger. So like, I'll put up with the guy who's broke and I'll put up with the guy that wants to split the bills 50-50. If that's not, you know, your value system. Own your value system. Own your standards. Don't cater to men who don't fit those standards. You don't have to shame a guy for not making enough money or for not having, you know, the height or for not having the, you know, whatever it is that you want in a man. You don't have to shame a man for that. I don't think most women are really, but you don't have to shame a guy for being broke. If he's broke, he's broke. But he just may not be the man for you, right? But I think oftentimes you get into this pick-me energy of like, well, but I just want a man to pick me. So like, I'm gonna lower my standards. I'm gonna settle for the guy that wants to split the bill when in reality, I don't want a man who will do that. When you get caught up in that, and I have a lot of videos talking about standards and women with standards, ladies, whatever your standard is, your standard is. And I want you to also get into the mentality of thinking that like, 'cause there's a lot of guys out there that are gonna tell women that, oh, your standards are too high, your standards are ridiculous, or like you're not attractive or thin enough or whatever to have these standards. Ladies, your standards are not just for you. So if you ever start questioning like, you know, am I good enough to have these standards or am I this? These standards are not just for you, okay? As women, us having high standards, regardless of our age, our weight, our income, our, you know, skin color or whatever, like having these high standards, for one, is partly for your future children if you're planning to have children. And your future children deserve it, regardless of who you are as a person. Your future children deserve to have a father that has been held to high standards. And by doing that as a society, like society works better as a whole if women hold men to a higher standard, because we don't have a whole bunch of kids running around with, you know, subpar fathers and stuff. So I don't care, ladies, I don't care what your self-esteem is. And if you have low self-esteem and think that you have to lower your standards for a man, work on that. I encourage you to work on that. But I know that's challenging and I know that can be a real journey. But also think about the fact that those standards are not just for you. They're for your future children. They're for society as a whole. So when you hold a man to a standard and say, no, you asked me on a date, I expect you to pay. And I don't want to go on a date with a man that cannot afford to buy me a meal. Well, guess what? You shouldn't be dating a man that can't afford to buy you a meal. You should not get to the point where you sleep with a man who can't afford to buy you a meal. Because how is that man going to afford to feed your children? How is that man going to afford to put a roof over your head? How is that man going to afford any of those things? It's not necessarily just for you. Your standards do not depend on who you are as a person. You hold those standards because it's a better standard for everybody, for society as a whole. Because when women hold men to higher standards, men have to become better people. Men are still gonna want to mate. Like, there's still this idea that like men are like, we could survive without women. You really couldn't. They couldn't. I mean, that's just ridiculous. This is a whole other tangent that I'm going on, and I'm getting off track here. I get really passionate about this stuff. Anyway, I also want to talk about the concept of decentering men, which I do think is somewhat tied to pick-me energy. Because in the society that we live in today, unfortunately, we tend to be in a mentality of extremes. So we tend to think that the opposite of a pick-me, which is somebody who is like desperate and needy for a man, we often swing to the opposite extreme, which is like, I don't need no man. And if you have that mentality and you're happy that way, more power to you. However, I do feel like there's probably going to be a lot of women who are like, well, I don't necessarily want to be a strong, independent woman that runs around saying I don't need a man, right? And that's fine too. I've been seeing a lot on social media, and I don't know actually where the term originated. There's several influencers who talk about this regularly, so I'm not exactly sure where the term actually originated, but it's the concept of decentering men. And I really love this concept because it's really not about like being a man hater or hating men, because in reality that's not a healthy place to be in the same way it's really not healthy for men to be hating women and seeing women as being the bad guys or the villains. It's not really good for women to be seeing men as being the bad guys or the villains either. It's not a healthy mindset to be in. As women, we definitely need to protect ourselves from the bad people in society, particularly bad men, because we are more vulnerable and we are more at risk for violence, abuse, things like that. However, hating all men and vilifying all men is not a good, healthy mindset for women to be in. And feeling like we absolutely need to be needy, dependent, and cater our lives and cater ourselves and cater our personalities, our bodies to men is not a healthy place to be in either. So the concept of decentering men really comes down to the idea of saying that as a woman, you're gonna live your life, you're gonna learn about yourself, you're gonna learn about your likes, your dislikes, the things that you want in life, the things that you desire, the visions you have for your life, your passions, your dreams, and focusing on them. And then when you actually learn to connect to yourself, you're gonna be in a better place to align with the right partner that matches with those dreams. I've used this example before, but like if you are, you know, a woman who's like, okay, I want a man who's a provider. Great, wonderful. But if you meet a man who has a provider mindset, but his provider mindset is to have a, you know, a big country home with chickens and cows and, you know, live off the land, and, you know, he's got the money so that he can, you know, he can fund this life, and this is what he wants. He wants the big house with the big kitchen and a wraparound porch, white picket fence and all this kind of stuff, and he has the money to fund that. But you're like, no, my dream is to live in a condo in the city and eat out at 5-star restaurants and travel all the time and, you know, be in a different city every night and stuff. Like, neither one of those dreams are right or wrong. Like, neither one of those dreams are a bad thing. However, those two people are probably not compatible. So you as a woman can say, okay, I want a high value man. I want a provider man. I want a protector man. Great. Wonderful. Own that. But what does that look like for you? And oftentimes, as women, we can get really caught up in trying to be the type of woman that a man that is high value or something would want. And we don't focus enough on, okay, but what do I want that life to look like? And we get caught up in making ourselves like the things that they like. When in reality, yeah, finding a provider man is great. Finding a man of value is great. But like, do your lifestyles align? Do your desires align? Do you need a man who's going to be around more often, or are you okay with a man that maybe needs to spend more time at his job? These things are important for you to know, because the reality is, if you end up in relationship with someone whose lifestyle, values, life structure, you know, their day-to-day life and stuff doesn't align with yours, and you try to fit yourself into that life, you're gonna build resentment. And as I said before, resentment destroys relationships, which is why it's important for you as a woman, and I think men should be doing this too, absolutely. It's important to focus on your wants and desires. That doesn't mean that you're like selfish and all about you, because in most cases in our current society, we expect women to sacrifice more of ourselves than men. So It's much easier for a woman to lose herself in a relationship than it is for men, which is why it's important for women to have a really good foundation of getting to know yourself, of knowing yourself, which is a lifelong process. However, the earlier that you start, the better connection you're gonna have with yourself. I gotta be honest with you, there might be some men that might argue with me about this, but in reality, I think most men who are, you know, reasonably healthy individuals are actually gonna agree. It's much easier to deal with a woman who knows herself and knows what she wants as a man. Because if as a woman, you don't even really kind of know what you want or what you like, men are gonna have a much harder time trying to figure that out and try to figure you out. If you as a woman know that you love the smell of fresh roses and a man is like, okay, I want to do something for you. What do you like? And you're like, I don't know. I don't know, whatever you want, whatever you want. And he just keeps guessing at what it is that you want. And it's never the right thing. It's never really what makes you happy. That's gonna get frustrating for him, right? And I'm not saying that men shouldn't try or put in the effort or something. Generally speaking, as a woman, if you don't know yourself, it's really, really hard to expect your partner to really know you very well either. So it's actually helpful to men. And I know I've had some conversations with men online about, like when I made my sacred sexuality video, of how many men that are like, I really appreciate when a woman knows her body and can actually communicate what she's interested in that way. Now, I'm not somebody who's telling women to go out and be promiscuous and sleep with a whole lot of people and whatever and that kind of stuff. I don't shame women who make that choice, but I'm not encouraging women to go out and do that. But in reality, exploring your own pleasure, and that can be sexual pleasure or that can be sensual pleasures or sensuality or things like that. Again, if most women are gonna want their partner to know them and see them. We're gonna wanna be seen and witnessed by our masculine partner on a deeper level. But if we can't even find ourselves, if we can't even actually connect to ourselves and our pleasure and our wants and needs and desires, it actually makes it a lot harder for our partner to show up in a way that we need, because we don't even know what that is. So if we don't even know ourselves, it's that much harder for him to know us, right? To be honest, the only men that are really going to complain about this stuff and call it selfish and, you know, say that women shouldn't have wants and needs or be upset about women who actually put learning about themselves and finding themselves, you know, and label that as being bad or wrong or selfish, are usually going to be the kind of men you wouldn't want to have anything to do with anyway. They're the kind of men who are, you know, just looking for a woman who's just going to be like their mother or their slave or something like that. And frankly, you want to weed those guys out anyway. So that's why I love the concept of decentering men, because in reality, it's not saying like, I don't want a man in my life or like screw men or I hate men. It's simply saying that I'm going to prioritize as a woman finding myself, connecting to myself. If you have guys that are like, oh, so you're telling women that they should just focus on career and not have kids. No, of course not. Or, oh, you're telling women to go out and sleep with a bunch of guys or something like that. No, because I think guys think that when I say women should like get to know themselves and connect with themselves, I think guys think of the things that they would do, like sleep around with a whole bunch of people. It's like, that's not what I'm telling women to do. In fact, usually people in general, male or female, that are doing that kind of thing, like being really promiscuous and sleeping around and things like that, I think that tends to be a trauma response or an addiction or something. So I'm not encouraging that. I'm encouraging you to get to know yourself. Just get to know yourself and not spend your time obsessing over trying to be what you think men might want. It's hard nowadays. I know for me, like when I was younger, and that was like before social media was even a thing, and I just had like magazines and that were like, oh, like 100 ways to please a guy or something like that or whatever. Like now with social media and all these podcast bros, it's even harder because there's so many voices out there that I think young girls can get so caught up in hearing what men are saying. And as women, I know there's a lot of women out there who are going to say that this doesn't happen to them, and more power to you if it doesn't, but there are a lot of women out there that they have it in them to like, okay, this guy said he wanted this, so maybe I need to be this. And there's a lot of voices out there. There's a lot of noise. And this goes for anything on social media. I think this even goes for female influencers out there. Like there's so much noise, whether it be about relationships or whether it be about, you know, becoming this person or becoming that person or something. There's a lot of noise out there that it's really hard for women nowadays to really tune in with their body and themselves. One of the greatest gifts that you can give yourself and your future partner and your current partner and your future or current children as women is to connect to our intuition. Our intuition is so powerful, and we can't connect to that intuition, like our inner voice, if we're listening to too many outside voices. That's one of the main aspects to this, is try to tune out the noise. Try to give yourself some time to really think and connect to yourself, to your inner voice, your intuition, your inner wisdom. Anything that you can do to do that is important. It's not selfish, and any partner that is worth having is actually going to appreciate the fact that you're doing that. You can appreciate the fact that you're connecting with yourself, appreciating the fact that you're connecting with things, your wants, your needs, your desires. Doesn't mean that you ignore your partner's needs and desires, or your children's if that's what you have. It doesn't mean anything about that. It just means that you also need to prioritize yourself. I'm sure this is a long video. I had a lot to say, and I know I went off on a lot of tangents, and I have a lot of thoughts about this topic and stuff. I probably could have a dozen other videos on offshoots of some of these things. So if there's any of these topics I mentioned in this video that you would like me to dive into deeper, please let me know. I'd be more than happy to talk about them. Again, huge advocate of men's mental health, but a lot of the pick-me behavior we're seeing online is not helping. It's absolutely not helping. Yeah, I really encourage women, again, focus on desire instead of need. Really learn to connect to yourself. Connect to your intuition, yourself, your wants, your desires, and it's gonna make your life more fulfilling overall in the long run. Please know that when I share with you the stuff that I share with you, a lot of it comes from life experience and things that I've learned, things that I wish I knew when I was younger. And I also have a lot of compassion for people out there who are pick-me's. I don't tend to shame people like that. I do think that some of the more popular influencers are really destructive, and it can be really dangerous, and that worries me. But I don't shame women that are caught up in that mentality, because it is ingrained in us as women, unfortunately, to really spend our lives catering to men and what men want and things like that. And again, if you want to live, you know, the very traditional trad wife lifestyle, more power to you. You know, any of these things that are more stereotypically feminine, if you want to embrace them, go for it. I have a pink room, for God's sakes. Like, I'm not judging any of that stuff. You know, the girly girl stuff. Embrace it. Love it. If you don't want to be involved in that, and you want to be more, you know, connected to your feminine in a more like earthy way or something like that, more power to you. Like, all those things are great. Just own that about yourself, and don't feel like you have to force yourself into a certain box to please somebody else. Like, own that stuff for yourself first, and don't feel like you have to be something for someone else. I think that's it's so important. I hope you guys learned something from this video, and if you're still listening, I appreciate it. Thank you so much. If you would like to connect to your dark feminine energy, which is actually really healing, especially if you're caught up in the like pick-me mentality, connecting to your dark feminine energy can actually be really healing. I have a book, The Dark Feminine Energy Guided Journal, which is actually a journal, a lot of journal prompts. It's like an interactive book with a lot of great tips to connect to different archetypes in your dark feminine energy, which can be really healing to your pick-me energy. And it also has a lot to do with the aspects of your feminine energy that are more in your own sovereignty as opposed to in partnership. The light feminine, when it comes to connection, partnership, all great. But if you are feeling yourself getting really caught up in being defined by a partnership or defined by your relationship status, connecting to your dark feminine energy can be really healing. So there's a link to that in the description box below, along with links to my online courses about feminine energy. I have more stuff coming soon, so be sure you stay tuned. If you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, please give it a big thumbs up, and be sure you subscribe to my channel. Again, all my links are in the description box below, along with links to all my social media accounts. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you join me next time.